I say this every election cycle, and I'll say it again. The 2024 political field was intense, so don't get left behind in 2025. If you're running for office, the first thing on your to-do list should be securing your name on the web. With a yourname.vote domain from GoDaddy.com, you'll stand out and make your mark. Don't wait. Get yours today.
Sam and I are always talking about being prepared, whether it's hurricanes in Florida, earthquakes in California, flooding in Arizona, or supply chain disruptions.
Exactly, Chuck. When pharmacies shut down, it does not matter how tough you are, you still need access to critical medicine.
That's why we trust Jace Medical. The Jace case comes with 5 life-saving antibiotics and key over-the-counter meds, so you're covered when things get disrupted.
And Jace goes beyond just the Jace case. They also offer first aid kits, daily prescriptions, and long-term nutrition with Jace Pantry. Don't wait for the next hurricane warning or natural disaster. Take control of your health and peace of mind today.
Visit jace.com and use code FUTURE at checkout for $10 off your order. That's FUTURE at JASE.com.
Welcome to another episode of Breaking Battlegrounds with your host, Chuck Warren. I'm Sam Stone. Our first guest up today, Chuck Flint, as the former Chief of Staff for Marsha Blackburn and former VP of Strategic Relationships at Breitbart. He is currently President and CEO of Alliance for IRS Accountability. Chuck Flint, welcome to the program.
It's great to be with you.
Yeah, we appreciate it. So CBS News was reporting this morning, which is a line, it's so fortuitous it comes the day you're coming on the show. Hundreds of Colorado business leaders call for action as nearly 100 companies leave the state. It's like the press, this is a real brain teaser for them. Chuck, explain to our audience why these businesses are leaving states like Colorado, Washington, and California. There was recently an opinion piece you did on it. Give us the scoop.
Well, it's simple. Money flows in the direction of least resistance, and these states have vilified people that have done very well, high-earning millionaires, billionaires, people with high net worths that are also job creators, and they're taxing them at exorbitant rates. And these folks are simply saying, you know what, we're just going to go ahead and move. And what it's doing is it's eroding the tax base of these states. And so all the soaring rhetoric that you hear from these progressive politicians that are talking about going after the rich, going after these companies that have X amount of revenue that they generate every year. These are the engines of the economy, and when they leave, these policies end up on the backs of the middle class. And that was the point of the op-ed that I wrote, that there's a great migration, and it's an affordability migration. People aren't leaving because they necessarily want to. They're leaving because they can't afford it anymore. And it doesn't make sense. And the American people aren't stupid.
Tell our audience why this retroactive tax, wealth tax that California is proposing, it's more than just simply taxing billionaires. Explain to it why this is just a horrible, slippery slope for anybody who owns any assets.
Because of the amount of money that's leaving the state. And so they're already running a budget deficit. You take all of that money now that's part of your tax base, and it's a large part of your tax base, and it's no longer there. So now they have to make it up. They're going to have more of a deficit. That is going to fall on the middle class, on the people that cannot afford to leave. And that's why these policies are so bad. That's where they ultimately land every single time. And there's also an element here of fraud. That's got to be discussed, because one of the billionaires who left said in the past he hadn't minded paying these taxes. He was a committed liberal, and that he thought that he was doing his duty, but now he has absolutely no confidence that this money goes where it's supposed to go. And in fact, there was a poll yesterday that said 75% of the American people believe that the government wastes their money. And that's a big problem.
Well, and they do. Yeah, that's the point. Yeah. They do, right? There seems to be no accountability. It seems like, I once had a business owner tell me, if you have good sales, you can hide a lot of your corporate sins because you just keep bringing in new revenue. That was his deal. Reverse that for government officials. If we can just keep taxing, and bring in new revenue, it hides the sins. Would you agree that's sort of what they do? It's just like, we'll just keep taxing and say we're doing it for X, but don't take any accountability for the funds they've already been given.
That's absolutely right. And that's why I mentioned these guaranteed basic income programs in Illinois. They layer failure on top of failure on top of failure. And you see it in these progressive states and cities. So they put these people, and I think that they're victims. I mean, the recipients of these programs, and I'll just focus on guaranteed basic income for a moment here, they're actually victims of these policies that have put them in this position in the first place, this position that hasn't nurtured any type of environment for affordability, for economic development. And so then they say, oh, okay, well, we're going to come in and we're going to fix it. We're going to make everything right. Here's $1,000 a month, and you'll be fine. And then they say no strings attached, except there's a giant string attached, and it's attached to the taxpayer. And that's the evolution that you see here. And the next evolution will be price controls. Oh, well, now that these evil corporate people, they're gouging you. And they're talking about it at grocery stores, and the margins at grocery stores aren't much. They're about 1.7%.
Right.
They're talking about it in healthcare and in other places, but that's the next step. It's this heavy-handed government intervention where they come in and say, we'll be the hero, we'll fix it, we'll make it right, capitalism isn't bad. And that's contributed a lot to this, and there is an embrace of socialism in the country. There's some polling, I can talk about it later, but anyway, to your question, it's layering all these failures on top of one another. They just refuse to address reality. And Kathy Hochul's comments recently are a good indication of that.
Chuck, do you think it seems to me, if you look at the history of Europe, now these blue states, they reach a point very quickly where you cannot tax effectively and run an economy anymore. And then they have to push beyond that so far. And that seems to be what's happening now, where they have a choice. They've lied to their voters for 20 years and said, we're going to tax the rich and take care of you for everything. The truth is the rich don't have enough money to make that possible. So now those taxes are going downhill at high speed and affecting middle-class people and driving out any hope of economic growth.
Yeah, let's take this from his opinion piece. So, this capital is flowing to states like Florida, Texas, Tennessee, Nevada, who have no income tax. Even Arizona, we're seeing it because we have a 2.5% flat tax, right? And Bloomberg reported, as you say in your opinion piece, between 2020 and 2023, more than 370 investment firms managing $2.7 trillion in assets relocated headquarters out of high-tax states into the Sun Belt, and California and New York lost roughly $1 trillion managed assets. Do you see a way that these blue states can pull out of this? Because what I see is that they just keep taxing and people just keep leaving. They keep digging a shovel.
They're chasing the taxpayers.
Yeah.
They're going into red states and focusing on low-level races at cities and counties and so forth, and raising taxes there. Their goal is clearly an international tax scheme, right?
Sorry, Chuck, for giving you a
long question. There's a way to do it. To your question there about, is there a way out of it? Of course there's a way out of it, but the question is, do they have any commitment to doing that?
No.
The way out of it is to lower taxes. But this is where I wanted to get into what Kathy Hochul is saying. Her comments recently I couldn't believe them. She was talking about, well, we have to go to Palm Beach and recruit all of these people back. But then at the same time, she's also talking about, well, if you leave, we're going to have an exit tax on you. And now other states are talking about an exit tax. And this is where I'm going with this evolution of it becomes more and more heavy-handed. Things don't work, so then they just continue to propose these interventions, these government interventions, right? Okay, not only are we going to drag you back, Kathy Hochul says, but if you try to leave, we're going to slap an exit tax on you. And I know that because I've got family in upstate New York, and they talk about it all the time. And you actually see what you see are states now, Oklahoma, Kentucky, and I believe there's another one, maybe West Virginia, where they're trying to phase out income tax because they see the growth that these non-state income tax states have had, Tennessee, Florida, Texas, Nevada, that you mentioned.
So let me ask you this, because you're a former prosecutor, so I feel you can at least give me your 2 cents worth.
I'll do my best.
So are these exit taxes even constitutional? Is someone going to challenge it with the Supreme Court? And by the way, California's been doing this forever. My family owned a dental lab in Vacaville, California in the late 90s. It took them finally 2 or 3 years to finally get out there and pay all the fees California wanted to charge them. So California's been doing this a long time. Now it's just because they're richer people doing it. It's a focus. But they've been doing this to small businesses forever. That being said, is this type of exit tax even constitutional? Or does federalism say states can do what they want?
I haven't looked into it, but it sounds to me like something that creates an awful lot of friction with the freedom of an individual to live the way that they want to in this country. If you're a state and you're saying that, well, if you leave, we're going to tax you, how much of a burden does it impose on you? Are we going to tax you $100 or are we going to tax you 50% of your income? It might depend on how much of a tax it is. But either way, it creates more friction for an individual to be able to exercise their choice to live the way that they want to and not live maybe in a state that they feel is not friendly or maybe not affordable.
Chuck, at what point do the frogs realize they're being boiled like this? I mean, in other words, when is there or will there ever be pushback from the Democrat side? It wasn't that long ago that Democrats were, obviously we didn't agree with them on everything, but they were competent at running local government. That has disappeared into this giant sea of fraud and taxation. How do they turn this around? I mean, their voters are voting in increasingly more radical people. Do you see an end in sight to this?
I think the fraud is going to play a big part of it because it's more recent, and it's not just fraud, it's industrial scale fraud. And progressive politicians, Gavin Newsom is just denying reality.
Yes.
His press office has been issuing statements that he's been fighting it. Even the California Attorney General held a press conference yesterday to say that this is just some type of political bright, shiny object that President Trump is grabbing at, and that they've been battling it for years. And my response to that is, if you've been battling it for years, then why does it exist?
Well, and where are the convictions?
Right. What have you done? If you were battling fraud, then we wouldn't have it. And that's the point. You've established no deterrence, which means that you do not take it seriously. And by the way, they've been warned. They've been warned for years on Medicaid since 2007. It was a high-risk program. The auditor warned them in 2022 about hospice fraud and specifically about clustering. At what point do they begin to take fraud seriously? I'm not sure. But they need to, because the American people are connecting it more and more to affordability. And I'll tell you something, Republican politicians, they need to start talking about it as an affordability issue as well.
Correct.
It is. It costs the economy up to 521, not the economy, but our budget. We lose up to 521 billion a year in fraud that they know of. That they know of.
By the way, we got 30 seconds here before we take a break. I have more of a philosophical question for you as a former prosecutor. There's a real lesson in this for all of us. I think it's because conservatives have been harping on the fraud, liberals immediately dismiss it. And do you find that as a prosecutor sometimes we have our prejudices and just because the source we're like, well, that can't be because I don't trust that source. That seems to be part of the problem, and we can answer that when we come back from this break here. How do people find you, by the way, Chuck?
You can find me at Chuck A. Flint on X, and then irsaccountability.org. I also run another coalition called the Coalition for Affordability and Prosperity. It's affordabilityprosperity.org.
Fantastic. We're with Chuck Flint, and we will be right back. This is Breaking Battlegrounds.
All right, imagine this. You're running for president. Yes, president. What's the first thing you need? Well, besides the $1 million fundraising, you need to secure your web domain. You need your name, .vote. Easy to remember, straight to the point, and a direct link to your campaign. No, but seriously, whether you're getting out to vote or convincing people that yes, you can fix the potholes on Main Street, a .vote domain helps you stand out. It's not just a website, it's a call to action. Head over to GoDaddy.com or name.com, type in your name, .vote, and boom, you're ready to make a lasting impact. Get started today with your .vote web address.
All right, welcome back to Breaking Battlegrounds. We're continuing on now with Chuck Flint. He is the president and CEO of Alliance for IRS Accountability, and highly recommend checking out Striking Flint, his Substack blog, which is incredible. Chuck, one of the pieces you had on there back in February, Use It or Lose It, how federal budgeting guarantees billions in waste. Do you think this is actually one of the things that's at the root of this epidemic of fraud, is that all these local governments, every budget cycle, they're desperate to increase their budget, increase their scope, all these bureaucrats running around trying to expand their empires. And so you just get into the mindset of the more money we spend, the better it is.
Absolutely. That's why you need to move to zero-based budgeting. We don't have that. We have a budget system federally and probably at a lot of the state and local levels where you have to justify every dollar that you ask for the following year. So then they say, well, we've got to spend our whole budget. Even if they can return money to the taxpayer, they will not. They will go ahead and spend all of that budget. It's a mindset. And the second thing I would add is that the watchdogs that are within these agencies that are charged with finding fraud, the inspectors general, there's a tension that exists there because they're ultimately overseen by the people who are making the decisions and also having to go before Congress or before their local state government and asking for more money. So do you really want to do your job that well? And I don't mean to impugn their integrity, but the better way to do it would be to have them be completely independent outside of the agencies. Then they can really do their job.
100%.
Explain to our audience zero-based budgeting, please. I don't think it's a fancy term.
You start the year off at zero. That is your budget. It's not what you got the previous year. You justify every expenditure. You don't say that because, in the last year we were given X amount of dollars and we spent all X amount of dollars. We need that much. And also they're going to ask for more. They ask for more all the time. So you start with the baseline of zero, as it says there, and there's a bill in the Senate. I think it's Senator Risch has a bill right now on this. Member of Congress that I used to work for back from Florida was very big on zero-based budgeting. A congressman named Dennis Ross, and he would talk about this a lot.
Well, it also insulates those governments and agencies during downturns. So I've seen this directly working with the city of Phoenix and Maricopa County. When the budget's tight, as each individual department, each budget cycle has to go up, they'll do their presentation for what they want above baseline. But if they say, I don't want anything more than what I had last year, there's zero scrutiny on it. Nobody looks at it.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Chuck, you posted on Twitter that Congress has asked the IRS for a briefing by April 22nd how the CCP-linked groups exploiting the U.S. nonprofit system were allegedly interfering with American elections. And then you talk about Neville Singham's network pouring $278 million into these groups. Explain to our audience a little background on this and why this is so dangerous for America.
Neville Singham is a former American CEO. He was a tech CEO. He sold his company in 2017. He's a committed communist. He moved over to Shanghai. He's married to the co-founder of Code Pink, and he has been funneling money into nonprofits. The People's Forum in New York City is one. The Answer Coalition is another one. Those are two of the biggest that I know of. And it's roughly $270 million plus, $278 million, I believe is the exact number. But what they're doing is just pumping out a bunch of Chinese propaganda into our ecosystem here with a lot of these protests. They're present there. They provide infrastructure. And what they're doing is they're undermining our democracy. And that's the goal. And inciting political violence. In some instances, they were there at the protests in Minnesota. I believe they've been, instrumental also earlier in the year in Los Angeles, in 2025, when there were a lot of riots over the ICE presence. And so that's what they're doing. They have their tentacles in a lot of different places. And he actually, this will be interesting for your audience, he authored a report about the U.S. involvement in World War II and downplaying it and saying that it was really the Chinese working with the Russians who won the war, and just really slap at all the veterans that died in that war. I mean, you think about D-Day and the American commitment to global security. But he's doing that because China doesn't like the world order. And China wants a different world order where obviously it has more power.
Does a guy like Neville Singham argue for changes in U.S. law in how we view foreign adversaries? Because I view a guy like him as no different as a foreign adversary given his reach. I mean, for instance, he was reportedly one of the people in the UK's ear over the Chagos Islands issue and others. Should we be treating these individuals like hostile state actors and putting sanctions on them and targeting them and restricting their access to our markets and our cities?
I think it's twofold. If you can prove that he's an agent of the Chinese government, then yes. And I would argue that that's probably not difficult to prove.
Right.
Everybody over there that has any type of social standing, I think he's a dual citizen. They have national security laws over there that if the Chinese say you've got to do something, then essentially you have to do it. You're in their grip, and I'm sure that he's in their grip. As far as what we can do here, they should cut off the tax-exempt status for the Answer Coalition, the People's Forum. That'll stop the money train from coming in. It'll kind of neuter his little empire there and make things more difficult. He should have to register probably as a foreign agent. I'm not an expert in FARA, but
Chuck,
it seems pretty basic.
Explain to our audience quickly about taking away their nonprofit status. What does that take? Because people are saying, okay, why isn't it not done? I mean, there's a process. What has to be done?
There's a process, but it's not. It is not as lengthy a process as having to go through a prosecution, which would take a lot of time.
Right.
The IRS should just strip the tax-exempt status. It's an administrative issue. Just strip it. Do it. We already know that they're involved in activity that is undermining this country. It's malicious. It is. Yeah. Anyway, I mean, I think I don't want to continue.
Well, you're preaching to the choir, and quite frankly, the tax code has been so abused by these Democrat activist orgs. It should be totally stripped from that category. Entirely, and disclosure should be added to it, I think, at this point. We're not serving people with any of these programs.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of times people want new laws. The laws are there to go and protect the American citizen and taxpayer. By the way, it was announced 2 hours ago that KB Homes, the giant home builder, ranked number 526 on the Fortune 1000, is moving its headquarters from L.A. to Arizona.
There you go.
Yeah.
At what point, this is the question that has to be asked. At what point is there enough evidence for these progressive individuals that are and they're the ones making these policies. This is not political narrative that I'm giving you. This is a factual based argument. And these facts are irrefutable. They're absolutely irrefutable. Mm-hmm. 370,000 people, more than that, left California and New York in 2023. California lost more than 200,000 people in 2025, and LA County lost 54,000.
And they're not losing the people on welfare. They're losing the people who are paying the taxes.
No.
Chuck Flint, thank you so much for joining us, folks. Follow him on X at Chuck A. Flint. Breaking Battlegrounds will be coming back here with more in just a couple of minutes. You do not want to miss our next guest, Anna Giaritelli, friend of the program, talking about her new book. So stay tuned for that. And check us out, breakingbattlegrounds.vote, to sign up for all the extra content.
Sam and I are always talking about being prepared, whether it's hurricanes in Florida, earthquakes in California, flooding in Arizona, or supply chains disruptions.
Exactly, Chuck. When pharmacies shut down, it does not matter how tough you are, you still need access to critical medicine.
That's why we trust Jace Medical. The Jace case comes with 5 life-saving antibiotics and key over-the-counter meds, so you're covered when things get disrupted.
And Jace goes beyond just the Jace case. They also offer first aid kits, daily prescriptions, and long-term nutrition with Jace Pantry. Don't wait for the next hurricane warning or natural disaster. Take control of your health and peace of mind today.
Visit jace.com and use code FUTURE at checkout for $10 off your order. That's FUTURE at JASE.com.
In today's digital world, standing out is more important than ever. Whether you're running for office, leading a cause, or hosting a vote for the cutest pet in town, you need a web domain that's simple, memorable, and action-oriented. You need a .vote web domain. It's clear, impactful, and establishes a lasting presence for your campaign. Don't wait. Head to GoDaddy.com or Name.com, type in your name.vote, and get started today. Because after all, every pet deserves a web address that's as special as they are.
Welcome back to Breaking Battlegrounds with your host, Chuck Warren. I'm Sam Stone. Our next guest up today, Anna Giaritelli, is a friend of the program. She has a new book out. You definitely want to check that out. Under Assault, now available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Walmart. And if you DM us, the first 5 people who DM us with their address, we will give you a free copy of that book as well. So, Anna Giaritelli, welcome back to the program.
Thank you. That is such a great giveaway. I'm so excited and honored.
It is. It's too bad it's not at Christmas, but here we are in April.
Yeah.
So we have a question. So let's first talk about border security. So it's reported yesterday that U.S. Border Patrol apprehended 4 British citizens for entering the U.S. illegally from Canada, the remote area Maine. They've been identified as Mohammed, Sultan Saleh. The other 3 have a similar name. Do we have a porous border problem between Canada and the United States?
We do. There's no other way to put it. I've been down to the border all around, actually, over 60 times since 2018. And on my trips to the northern border, it's always fairly shocking to see just how wide open it is. It's double the length when you include the Alaskan border with Canada, as opposed to the southern border. It's more than double the length. And there is no fence or barrier, anything up there. It's all technology, and it is so remote that typically serves as the greatest deterrent. And where we do see the most apprehensions of people crossing is Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. Now, the British individuals who were apprehended, we do tend to see Europeans caught crossing the northern border in particular. But certainly that is a major national security concern, and Border Patrol is going to look into that and see what intelligence shows if there's a connection to a terror organization, and certainly why they're trying to get around rather than go through the ports of entry.
Does it seem like, for decades, essentially throughout the United States' recent history, we've assumed that illegal immigration from Canada is just going to be economic migration, a little bit of smuggling a pot. But other than that, that was really about it. But now, because of the Islamization of Europe, that becomes a much more dangerous border.
Yeah, it does. And we typically see people from Eastern Europe trying to cross into that part of New England and New York. So I'm intrigued. I want to know what was going on here. We actually have the most suspected or known terrorists apprehended or caught at the ports of entry along the northern border by far more than the southern border. But we have the most people crossing between those ports of entry at the southern border. So it's really interesting to have I don't know that they're suspected terrorists. We'll find out. But coming up in that area. And it just goes to show Border Patrol can't have its guard down in any part of the country.
And that includes, obviously, all of our airports, this DHS funding issue, which has been in the news and remains out there despite the temporary reprieve. How important is it for Congress to stop playing games and get a real solution on the table for that and stop freaking out over ICE? Do they need to maybe separate ICE from the rest of it going forward, if that's going to be that controversial?
That's an interesting idea. We haven't really seen anyone, at least publicly, pitching that in a really meaningful way. That way the rest of DHS could get on with its business. ICE is so entrenched with Customs and Border Protection and U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, other agencies within DHS, that it sort of has to be connected to them. But you're right. We're going on week 8 now, almost, with the funding crisis, and DHS is now fully paid. Employees will be fully paid by the end of next week. That's something that Mark Wayne Mullen, the new DHS secretary, has brokered a deal with the White House behind the scenes, even before taking office. But so he's fixed the immediate issue. But at the end of the day, you're right. the DHS is being held hostage over policy disagreements. And, these are supposed to be the best policymakers in the country, right? We send them to Washington to make deals, and they can't make a deal. So there's got to be a better way than holding people hostage.
Well, you'd like to think so, but then again, if we all remember that Johns Hopkins IQ study of Congress and the Senate from about a decade ago, I lose hope.
I haven't seen it, but I can imagine the results.
I think it was like an average of 97 in the Senate, which is right about national average. But you'd hope they're smarter than that, wouldn't you?
Yeah. You'd like to think, or have the business savvy. I mean, for all the flack that President Trump gets, he is a businessman, and you have to have a certain type of diplomacy, and even with what he's doing with Iran right now, talking
right.
Probably the
politics.
harshest he's ever spoken with. That's an interesting tactic, but he does know how to get deals done. He does know how to make friends out of enemies. And so, you would expect to see more of that, I think, in Congress.
You need a lot more of that. Anna Giaratelli, we're coming back with more here in just a moment, so stay tuned for that. Breaking Battlegrounds, coming right back.
Sam and I are always talking about being prepared, whether it's hurricanes in Florida, earthquakes in California, flooding in Arizona, or supply chain disruptions.
Exactly, Chuck. When pharmacies shut down, it does not matter how tough you are, you still need access to critical medicine.
That's why we trust Jace Medical. The Jace case comes with 5 life-saving antibiotics and key over-the-counter meds, so you're covered when things get disrupted.
And Jace goes beyond just the Jace case. They also offer first aid kits, daily prescriptions, and long-term nutrition with Jace Pantry. Don't wait for the next hurricane warning or natural disaster. Take control of your health and peace of mind today.
Visit jace.com and use code FUTURE at checkout for $10 off your order. That's FUTURE at JASE.com.
In today's digital world, standing out is more important than ever. Whether you're running for office, leading a cause, or hosting a vote for the cutest pet in town, you need a web domain that's simple, memorable, and action-oriented. You need a .vote web domain. It's clear, impactful, and establishes a lasting presence for your campaign. Don't wait. Head to GoDaddy.com or name.com, type in your name.vote, and get started today. Because after all, every pet deserves a web address that's as special as they are.
All right, welcome back to Breaking Battlegrounds. We're continuing on now with friend of the program, Anna Giaratelli. You can follow her on X at Anna_Giaratelli. She is the author of a new book, Under Assault, available now wherever you buy your books. And again, if you send us at Breaking Battlegrounds on our X feed, if you DM us your address, the first 5 people that do that, we will send you a free copy of this book. Anna, thank you once again for joining us. Tell us tell us the story behind this book, because you've been on the program and told it, but a lot of people may not remember that story or may have become new listeners. We love them too.
It's a story of devastation and hope, which the two go really well together. And I think it's something that, since 1998, more than 17 million American women have been victims of attempted rape or rape. And
17 million.
So it's not. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. You just stunned me with that. So,
it's incredible. It's the most underreported crime in the country.
Oh, so 17 million sexual assault?
17 million sexual assaults. Yes.
That just makes me sick to my stomach.
Over almost 3 decades. Yeah. I'd say it's not a crime. It's violence targeted specifically at people because of their gender.
That's over 500,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, Anna. I'm sorry. I don't mean to throw you. This is really.
Well, that's what's reported. Yeah. Is that what's reported?
That's what we know. This was according to federal data that was looked at by RAINN. It's the largest anti-sexual assault group in the country.
As a side note here, and I'm going to let you continue, but as a side note here, someone asked me the other day in my old age, what has been one of my surprises in my life? And a lot of my staff is female. And I said, I have been surprised how many women have been assaulted over their life. Mm-hmm. It stuns me, to be honest with you. But continue.
Yeah. Well, here's what I get at in the book. I wanted people to understand my life story, my background leading up to this. I'm 36 now. When I was 17, I was sexually assaulted. Didn't didn't know it was assault at that point. I thought it was my fault. And so I never reported it, never did anything. And years later in my 20s was when an adult, a resident director in college, said, that's assault. What you went through was statutory rape, according to the state we're in. And I never saw a counselor. I didn't get help. I just thought, it's over. Let's move on. And fast forward to DC. I was in DC about 7 years, but when I first got there, I was working at a company, and this is all in the book. And I had a boss tell me in a text message, I have a proposition for you. We're going to have sex, and it's going to be good for you.
How old were you?
And
How old were you?
I can't say the age because
Okay.
I don't want to give away the company I was at in the book.
Right.
Mhm. I haven't signed an NDR, but I still want to keep that.
Okay. Okay.
But I was my first 2 years within DC.
Oh my
And
gosh.
the guy was married and he was 15 years older than me. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do. You don't train for that. Growing up, you might get assaulted, but learn self-defense. You don't learn self-defense for the workplace. And so I was finally coming out of that second situation, and I would call that harassment.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't call it assault. But by 2020, when I was walking down the street one Saturday morning to go mail a package I had in my hand, I was randomly charged at by a man on the street who I found out was homeless, and he took me down. And I fought for my life, not knowing what was happening. And in the process, he began to sexually assault me. And people came over hearing me screaming. He was also screaming. It was a bizarre attack, and they got him off me. I don't remember much of the attack at the end, but he got away, and they were able to use DNA from my clothes to track him down. He was already in the DC Police's criminal database, not surprisingly. And so a couple months later, they found him on the street. They got the DNA results. They found him. They arrested him. They called me, said, we just arrested him. However, he got released the next day because there's not enough room in the DC jail. And we found out he lives a couple blocks from your apartment.
Jeez.
And I said, what do I do? And I had gone down to my parents' house out of state. I didn't want to give up. I didn't want to have to change my life because of this. I tried to minimize it, right? And so it's hard to minimize when the U.S. Attorney's Office says we're going to prosecute your case. That's a pretty big deal.
Right.
So it took about a year and a half before the case moved. It kept getting delayed. And in that time, he was arrested 5 additional times by police for five different crimes. And the U.S. Attorney's Office would usually call me, email me, or send me a letter saying he has been arrested and he was released the following day. And so during the early part of that, I said, I can't do this anymore. I moved across town, was there for 6 months, and said, I can't stay in DC. I felt so betrayed by the city. City I loved and wanted to stay and work in for decades, my home. And I just felt, stabbed in the back by the city. It wouldn't protect me. And so I left, went to Texas, and worked there, lived near family, and he was sentenced to federal prison. He got about 2.5 years for assaulting me. He had assaulted another off-duty police officer, a woman who survived prior to me, and the 5 other arrests. And he's back out on the street now. And I think the worst, it's hard to say what's worse than an actual sexual assault, but I discovered in looking at the crime stats that my attack, my crime, wasn't in the DC police crime stats. And you can pull this up just by logging on their website and going to crime cards. It used to be pins on a map that would show you where each crime occurred. And I looked and I didn't see mine. And I reached out to the DC police in 2020 at the time and I said, have you not had time to upload it? What's going on? And they said, well, your offense was not a first-degree sex abuse offense. So we only put first-degree offenses on the map. And that was devastating. That was devastating. And incredibly, I think, ironic that you'd have, the Justice Department. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, given the number that you cited earlier of 17 million, and Chuck, to your point, the crime against you was not reported as a crime in that way. It was, right? Would that even count in the statistics?
I don't know how the FBI takes the data from police departments and sheriff's departments around the country and calculates it. But certainly, if you look at all the different cities around the country, and I'm assuming they're all in on this, they're all calculating crime in this rigged way. You're thinking, wow, sex abuse, sexual assault charges are pretty good, pretty low, manageable. And then you see this number of, this many
Right.
per year. When I looked in August, when I wrote the op-ed, I looked at DC Police's website and I put in sex abuse for the past year, and it showed 53. And I thought, absolutely not. And that
Right.
doesn't include all the other,
No,
which
that's-
there's going to be far more second and third degree than the most serious first degree. And so it's totally rigged. And yeah, you're right. How does the FBI actually know? Do they really know? Oh, do they get the behind the scenes stats to know what's actually being charged? But to me, it felt like, well, why are we even prosecuting this if
Right.
it doesn't matter, if it's not that severe?
Right. Let me,
And so I saw the system fail just over and over and over. And I hated DC. I mean, I hated the city. And I talk about that in the book. There's been every negative emotion possible I have felt through this and continue to feel sometimes. But it has been a long recovery, but I have really recovered, and sharing my story now is meant to show other women, whether you report it or not, whether you've been harassed or assaulted, we're in this together, and we're going to get through it, because I think hope is such a huge part that victims need in order to go from victim to survivor. That's a really empowering thing.
Right. Well, I have, for a little bit of time, I have some questions here I want to ask.
Yeah, sorry.
They're more, no, you've been great. You're more philosophical. Michael Lewis, the author, years ago lost his daughter, and he was talking about grief in this interview, and he was talking about people who are close to you don't know how to really help on grief. And he had a friend that came to his door when his daughter died and just said, I'll be setting out here if you need me. And for 2 days, he just sat on the porch. I asked that question because I've always remembered that conversation. You had your parents and friends. They're affected by this because they love you. If you are not the victim, but you're someone close to the victim, I know there's not a general rule, but what should they do? Is there anything they can do to comfort, or is it just being there?
One of the biggest ways is not asking how I can help you, but just doing something. I was not in a place for weeks and months to eat. I lost 40 pounds in the first 2 months. I should have been hospitalized for what was going on in my head. I was completely unstable. And I also didn't want to go to the hospital, so I wouldn't tell anybody. But I mean, the bare minimum was food. I couldn't cook for myself. I didn't want to order out. It was adding up. And, but that metaphor of someone literally showing up and sitting on your steps, I just wanted to be around people.
Right.
I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't feel, or people would say to me too, well, you're lucky you weren't raped. And it invalidated what had happened to me.
Correct.
And they meant well. I had family who said that too. You're lucky it wasn't worse. But being there for someone, physically present, is truly the greatest thing. And I read a study after in therapy that said 2 weeks after a traumatic event, the greatest indicator of how that person's going to do long term is if they have people physically around them in those 2 weeks. And I got attacked at the start of COVID in DC. I get into it in the book, was very different than other parts of the country, especially the South. I lived alone, 6 floors up.
Oh, boy.
I had no contact with anyone. People wouldn't come out and see me except for one person who I would go on walks with on occasion those 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And so that really was a huge reason for my decline. But you're right. People are the greatest asset, even not speaking.
Yeah. We have we have 2 minutes left here with you. My next question is, how can men be part of the solution here?
I would say that the book is written as much for men as women, because I think plenty of men want to understand. We understand, a reasonable man understands why sexual assault is bad and why a woman would not like that,
Sure.
right? But how is it devastating? What are the long term? What is it like to move through it? What do they need in that process? And that's what it really gets into. And I think it also helps them understand just how pervasive this is. Coming out with my story, I was embarrassed because I felt like some people are going to say, well, she asked for it in this or this way. But I had to say, this is just what happened to me. I didn't ask for any of this. I wasn't, no woman asks for assault. And I think seeing it from a lens of someone and how they've walked through life for the last 20 years is a really good way to understand. And then advocating for women. I don't know what the locker room talks are like or at the water cooler, all sorts of things. But even men saying, I don't know, that's not cool. However they want to do it, this is a societal problem. It's going to be a long-term fix, right? And we're all human. We can decide what we do. So we're never going to fix this on this side of heaven. But certainly people who want to help can get involved where they're able to.
Last question before we wrap up. How has your faith helped you get through this?
My faith was everything. I wouldn't be here today without Jesus Christ. And I got to the worst parts of my life over a couple of years and had to surrender to this idea that if the suicidal thoughts and such never went away, if the anxiety, unbearable anxiety never went away, having Jesus was enough for me. And what does that really mean? My faith at the worst and less worst parts of this has been what I've clung to. And I praise God for it. I now look back at that attack as one of the best things to happen that he's used for his good in my life.
Anna, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for being vulnerable. Thank you for sharing your story. Folks, again, if you DM us on social media, first 5 get a free book from Anna. Anna, as always, we love having you on the show. Hopefully we can talk about happier topics next time.
Certainly. Thank you so much, guys.
This is Breaking Battlegrounds. You can find us at breakingbattlegrounds.vote. For those who listen to this on podcast, stay tuned. We've got a couple more guests. Have a great weekend.
I say this every election cycle, and I'll say it again. The 2024 political field was intense, so don't get left behind in 2025. If you're running for office, the first thing on your to-do list should be securing your name on the web. With the yourname.vote domain from GoDaddy.com, you'll stand out and make your mark. Don't wait. Get yours today.
All right, well, whoa, that was a new one. Welcome back to Breaking Battlegrounds with your host, Chuck Warren. I'm Sam Stone. Our next guest up today, Abigail Anthony, is a staff writer at the National Review with one of the better Twitter handles you're going to find out there, Abigail and Words. Pretty fantastic. Abigail Anthony, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Abigail, I want to play you a clip real quick. Go ahead, Jeremy.
Why do you want to be here? Why do you love space? Why do you love being a part of history?
We're going back to the frickin' moon. That's
So, Abigail, you're younger than us. Do any of your colleagues or peers talk about us going to the moon? I mean, when we were young, this would have been a big deal. Do you have peers talking about this?
Yes, I think so. Admittedly, over the past week or two, I've been really focused on reporting the story about Washington State violating the Constitution, and I have not kept up with our amazing trip to the moon. But I do think people are excited. It's certainly a momentous time.
It seems a little sad that it's just sort of been pushed in the background, don't you think? With all that's going on in the world.
Well, I'd certainly rather talk about that than fraud in Washington State and every other state. But that's why we have
that's why we have her on today.
The program today.
So Abigail, tell us, Washington State is encouraging racial discrimination with taxpayer-funded daycare centers, and they're taking millions of taxpayer dollars. Tell us about the story, what led you to it, and what has surprised you about it.
Sure. So I co-wrote a handful of articles with my friend Malia Marks, who is finishing up her PhD over at Cambridge University. She actually brought an article to National Review focused on Somali daycares and their overrepresentation in Washington state, which is where she's from. National Review loved the data in the article, but she didn't have a strong background in journalism. And so they said, oh, well, why don't you collaborate with Abigail and we'll make this a little bit more suitable for the style of the paper. And so she and I spent, I think, months just looking into this issue. It was a very thorough investigation, and it seemed like every single day we were coming up with, or we were encountering another red flag from this group or this individual. So we spent quite a lot of time on this article about the overrepresentation of Somali-run daycares and what seems to be significant financial abuse. As we were writing those articles, we came across several racially discriminatory programs operated by Washington state. So one, the Department of Children, Youth, and Families at Washington State's considers race when it's awarding this specific equity grant to daycare providers. It almost certainly runs afoul of the 14th Amendment. And then another department has several programs that almost certainly run afoul of the 14th Amendment. So there are very specific business certifications that are awarded to minorities, and minorities who then receive this business certificate then become eligible for a certain low interest loan program, and they're added to a special directory. The aim of the directory is to increase diversity in government contracting. These are all really big red flags, and so we'll see if they end up in court.
Well, so how did these, I remember when all the stuff started coming out in Minnesota and Nick Shirley's work there and others exposing that. And Washington State immediately ran out and started passing sort of anti-transparency laws around some of these areas. How was that not a giant red flag? And are federal agencies now starting to look into this? Is the Trump administration starting to look at Washington? Because we know they have a big job in front of them in Minnesota and California, and I think it's pretty much every state.
Right. So I will wager that Washington State itself will not conduct a particularly thorough inquiry. And so we might need the federal government to step in. I do know that the DOJ has been made aware of our articles and took them seriously. I could not tell you whether or not an investigation will actually follow. But you're right that the state itself has attempted to stifle inquiries. So you had politicians stating that, look, if you approach certain daycares and ask questions, you might be guilty of a hate crime. And so my co-author, who was based in Washington State, was very worried that she might be arrested as she approached these daycares and requested comment. It was certainly perceived by us to be an attempt to silence the press.
Has there been any pushback on your articles since they've come out? Have any of the politicians, from Washington, either Washington State or Washington, D.C., pushed back and said, no, this isn't real? Or have they denied it at all?
Not that I am aware of. One other point I would like to make just briefly is that, of course, we contacted all of the individuals and organizations and departments involved as we were writing these stories. And so we presented all the information we had. We asked them for comment. We hoped that they would provide an explanation. And quite frankly, I was hoping they would say, oh, no, there's a totally legitimate and reasonable explanation for this. I would have loved for the outcome to have been actually everything's fine. But not one actually responded to us. And after the articles, we didn't receive any direct comments from them either, including lawsuits. So that's a bit reassuring.
So let me ask you more about the article that you had come out, today, I believe, Washington State is giving a leg up to minority-owned businesses through legally suspect programs. And we've talked about the 14th Amendment on that. But they give special certifications to small businesses that are owned by racial minorities, women, LGBTQ identifying individuals, and then particular net worth thresholds. First of all, what does it mean when these folks get these special certificates for government hiring? Why is that important?
Sure. So first, one of the issues is that these certificates are awarded to individuals deemed socially disadvantaged. And the major problem is that the state presumes pretty much all minority races to be socially disadvantaged. So that's disparate treatment on the basis of race. And the government would have a very hard time justifying that in court. In the event that an individual receives one of these certifications, they can then apply for a very particular low interest loan program, and then they're added to a special directory. And the aim of the directory is to increase diversity in contracting. What's interesting, though, is that the state itself conducted what is called a disparity study, and the original round of analysis did not find that minority-owned businesses were performing poorly. In fact, it found that they were overrepresented in contracting with the state. And so then the researchers removed critical areas from the analysis, and they wanted to find a different type of disparity. So if you're one of those sort of anti-racist progressives, you probably would have looked at the first round of the data and wanted to celebrate, but that didn't happen. So I'm not sure why they want the numbers to show that there's poor outcomes.
So how can a white male theoretically can qualify for this, but he has to be socially disadvantaged? What does that mean that the white male-owned business has to be socially disadvantaged? What does that mean?
I don't know. And you would think after 2020, when every major institution and university condemned whiteness, that we would assume that there is some sort of social disadvantage to being white. You would think that
right.
there would be certain sort of cultural biases against whites based on everything that happened with anti-racism in 2020. However, the scheme by the state does not operate that way. I quite frankly don't know how these sort of DEI bureaucrats think. I prefer to not think like them. And so I don't know what thresholds they would say a white male has to satisfy in order to qualify.
Abigail, we're speaking with Abigail Anthony, staff writer at National Review. You can follow her on X at Abigail in Words. Abigail, did you talk to, in Washington State, did you talk to any legit daycare providers? Because I would tend to think that people who are legitimately providing these services would be every bit as offended as many of our listeners will be, hearing about this, because it's taking away from their mission. I mean, these are funds that are meant to achieve something that is just being stolen.
Right. So my co-author, Malia Marks, was based in Washington State. She has a video up on Twitter that's maybe 25, 30 minutes long that shows her going door to door to a number of daycares. A handful seemed legitimate of the ones that she visited. Someone answered the door or provided forms or was able to answer questions about enrollment, but it was a very tiny fraction of the ones that she visited that seemed legitimate.
Wow, fascinating. What follow-up will you be doing on this topic in Washington's fraud? Are we doing more stories?
Yes, so we have a fourth in the works that is about a particular nonprofit, and we're still going through all the data there. And so I honestly couldn't tell you when it's going to be published. But Washington State, it's Democrat led. I'm sure there's plenty of abuses that we could find. Malia and I are just constantly texting back and forth because we'll see something on Twitter. We're like, oh my gosh, this could be another article. Or, we'll see another screenshot on Twitter. Oh my gosh, now we have to look into this thing. It could honestly be a column.
Abigail, let me ask you this, and this is purely speculation here. Why do you think these progressive liberal politicians aren't more stringent on this? Because they supposedly want to help those who need it. So you're taking money away from people who don't who literally need it.
I dealt with this.
So Sam was the chief of staff of Phoenix City Council. Why?
I spent double on low income housing what it costs to build housing for the general public. And so I kept saying, you're stealing 50% of the housing you should have. And no one cared.
So, Abigail, why do you think that is? That doesn't make sense if you want to help people that need a leg up, but there's fraud going on that's taking money from them. Why do you think they do this?
Well, it's hard to make broad categorical claims.
I know. That's why we're asking.
I think in some cases it's incompetence. I think in some areas it's state agencies not being particularly well coordinated. So one particular example we cite is that a daycare had been registered as non-functioning with the state business registry, and yet years later it was still receiving government grants. To me, that just seems like the government agencies are not communicating with one another. And then when it comes to particular politicians, they might receive certain benefits from certain communities. So as we note in one article, this is in the one coming up. The now mayor of Seattle had spoken at particular events focused on Somali daycare communities and providers. And so maybe there's an electoral strategy. But again, I think there's a lot of different reasons, and not all are relevant for all individuals.
Well, okay. Well, last question here. You just came back from Oxford in September.
Yes.
If you're a parent or a ambitious young student, what are the positives of going to Oxford, and what is the one thing you found funny about it?
Well, it's a very, very different approach to education there. It is very self-guided, so you are really doing more independent research. And so I think for a graduate student, that can be great. So I actually was recently admitted to the doctoral program in law over there, and I haven't decided if I'm going to go. We'll see. I need funding because unlike in the United States, it's not paid over there to be a doctoral student. But what would be nice about that program specifically is that you don't necessarily have to take a lot of classes. You don't have to teach. You can just focus on doing the research that you want to do. And that's hard to find at various American universities. And then one thing I found funny, it's hard to say. This is very, very particular, but there was a college at Oxford called New College, and it was new, I think, in the 15th century. It's very odd being an American and standing in buildings that are, 1,000 or so years old. There's pubs there older than our own country. And so that was just sort of a shock to the system. And I definitely appreciated that. And I saw a lot of beauty in that.
It's the old Ron Swanson for the American. You ever watch Parks and Recreation?
A handful of times.
There's the old Ron Swanson statement. He's in London. He goes, "History started in 1776. Everything else is forgotten."
No. I disagree with Ron Swanson on this entirely. I really liked going into all those pubs in England that existed before the Revolutionary War, because I could imagine all the people crying into their warm beer at their loss.
Abigail, one last question. We hear all the time over here in America about thought police in England.
Right.
Did you find that to be true? Or are we exaggerating it here?
No, 100%. There is a massive problem with the regulation of speech over in England, there were times that I was legitimately concerned as a reporter that I would get in trouble for writing unpleasant facts. If you look through my reporting, I've done quite a bit on free speech in England, and I've also done a bit on the grooming gangs. That's a very particular phenomenon over there. But I found a few instances where individuals received more time in prison for their comments about the grooming gangs than actual members of the grooming gangs.
Yeah, that's just incredible. Well, Abigail, as always, it's such a pleasure to have you on. And let us know when you have your next article out so we can get you on here to talk about it.
Oh, great. Thank you. It was lovely to be back on.
You're doing excellent work. Welcome back to the USA, and let us know what you plan to do to go get your more doctorate at Oxford.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, folks. This is Breaking Battlegrounds. You can find us breakingbattlegrounds.vote. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to Breaking Battlegrounds. Everyone has been it's been a sad time with Breaking Battlegrounds with the loss of everyone's favorite segment, Kylie's Corner, with Kylie Kipper sailing off into the sunset as Kylie Campbell. What are we going to do? We created Bee's Hive. Is that what we're calling it? Bee's
Possibly.
Corner? Bee's Corner?
Bee's Corner, Bee's Hive.
TBT.
It's up in the air.
TBD.
It's a bee TBT?
Yep. Exactly what it is.
Okay.
So what do we got today, Bee?
All right. So today we actually have an ending of a serial killer situation. Accused Gilgo Beach serial killer Rex Heuermann has admitted to killing 8 women. As part of his plea agreement, he has agreed to cooperate with the FBI.
How many did they think he killed?
They think 8, but a lot of people are saying they think he killed more. And the reason he decided to plead guilty is not just for the victims' families to not go through more. It's so he doesn't have to spill his secrets on the rest of them.
Well,
why wouldn't you?
Well, so interestingly, though, generally when you allocute to those kind of things, part of your plea deal is you have to give them everything. So if they prove that he didn't give them everything down the road, they find another one that he didn't admit to, I think that plea deal gets thrown out.
Bee's young enough, and so is Sydney here, that they'll probably over the next 30, 40 years hear about more people that they'll then tie to him. That's what generally happens, right? Mm-hmm. It's sort of like they had a new one for Ted Bundy last week.
Was that wow.
Yeah, a new one from Ted Bundy.
Right.
And I mean, they had sketches, too, of this highway killer from like 10 years ago within the same time frame of his murders. And he hasn't been officially tied to those, but a lot of people say that it was one of like the stalkers. The sketches of him look exactly like him, too.
Like this Heuermann guy.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. A lot of people were tying that. So I think definitely down the road there are going to be more.
Now, take us back. Do you remember, how did this guy get caught originally?
So his first murder had occurred in 2010. There was 3 of them that were exposed, and they called them the Gilgo 3, which turned into the Gilgo 4.
And what's Gilgo? Where's Gilgo? Is it a beach or something?
Yeah, it's in New York.
Okay.
And so when another missing woman had been discovered in 2010, they decided that they needed to look into it more. And he ended up getting caught in 2022 under suspicion, which was confirmed in 2023 with a pizza crust where they found his DNA and it was linked to one of the other murders that he did.
Interesting.
And by that time...
Hold on, what was it? Why did the pizza... Was it left to the sign of a murder? That he was eating pizza?
No, they ended up following him. They had people on him.
They pulled it out of the trash can or whatever,
point. Yeah. They had a lot of suspicion at that point after, like, the 4 that were found, and then there was 2 more, and then there was 1 more, and then when he's in court, he admitted to an 8th. So,
wow.
But there's definitely more.
So there's no death penalty in New York, I assume?
Well, there used to be. I don't know, in the last 20 years if they've gotten rid of it.
Yeah, there's been no discussion about him getting the death penalty.
So, no, probably they have gotten rid of it.
So what are the families saying?
The families want to be done with the suffering and going through it and reliving it. And his lawyer made a statement that he wanted, to let them be at peace as well. But again, I think it's because there's more. There's more he doesn't want to spill.
Wow.
Did you see the series on Peacock about the gentleman Gacy?
Yeah.
And killed all those men, the gay men.
John Wayne Gacy, yeah.
Did you watch it?
I did.
I was surprised how eerie it was, just how he was so matter-of-fact about it.
Well, it seems that That actually, though, seems to be fairly consistent with the real
Right,
serial killers. Is there when they're talking about it, they could be describing how they put together lunch
or painting a bedroom.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was really odd. That's what I found odd. I mean, I thought the acting was spectacular on it.
Yeah. It's like dip it in the bucket, spread it on the wall. I mean, there's no emotion. I wonder if that though is a symptom of why they're serial killers, right?
Well, I mean, just remember in that particular episode when he takes them to the garage and just takes a spray paint can and starts Xing the spot where they're all buried and who they were.
Right.
And he starts explaining it. And he probably remembers this murderer where he buried all these women.
Yeah.
Were they prostitutes?
Yeah. Yeah, they're sex workers around the age of 20.
Okay.
Gacy was also very, very good with the people, though, too. Like, wasn't he, like...
He was Hubba Hubba. He was a Polish guy, social clubs.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean...
kind of ran the town a little bit,
I don't think this guy was. He was he an architect?
An architect in New York.
So, by the way, great story. Death Wish. Remember Death Wish with Charles Bronson?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So when they pitched the story to Universal, I think that was the studio, they went in and they said, the premise of Death Wish is a man's family, his wife and daughter are killed and raped. Okay? So he becomes a vigilante. And so they go in, he tells them, they say, well, what does he do for a career? And they go, he's an accountant. The president goes, an accountant can never do this. Make him an architect.
Well, there you go.
Well, there we have it.
There you have it.
So it has to be true. He's an architect.
Wasn't Michael Douglas's character in Falling Down an architect?
Uh-huh. Yeah. No, why do they think architects go crazy?
I don't know. We probably.
What is Hollywood's problem with architects? They all use them.
Yeah, but now I have to be nervous about it.
People are thrown off by it too because they said there's been so many serial killing cases where they haven't been able to pick up on who it is because of their personality and how they're smooth, and this guy does not show that.
So one thing that seems to be a little bit different about this guy was not as smart about hiding his tracks as most serial killers seem to be.
But it's his targets is why he got away so long. I mean, I was having this conversation the other day with McKinsey about this article in the Arizona Republic about 4 or 5 years ago. I think I shared it with you about what happens to people who are homeless or in prison who die because most families don't claim them.
Right.
So you have these poor young women who are these sex workers and families not claiming them.
Mm-hmm. Right.
They've written them off.
Well, wasn't that the Red River killer too?
Yeah. So the counties end up just burying them. And there's a great story in the Arizona Republic about this. Just they contact and they reach out to, for example, one reached out to her daughter. She was homeless. And she goes, I've been done with her for 20 years, and I'm not going to spend the money burying her. So
you have a potter's field. Every city has one.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's really interesting that and I don't think people understand how many potter's fields there are in the country.
Every city, every county. I mean, they're everywhere.
How many do you think there are in Phoenix?
Well, I know Phoenix has one. Maricopa County has one. I think there are 3 total. I think there's another one that's run by the state, actually, in this area.
Yeah. Well, anything else on this?
No. Just another serial killer put away.
Just
another serial killer.
20 years. It's about time, though.
Well, I got to say, though, the stories around these folks are getting less interesting. Like the Gilgo Beach killer, come on.
Like a pizza crust?
Yeah, where's the son of Sam? Where's the really creative?
He's just like a modern-day Jack the Ripper, I feel, but not as interesting.
No, because Jack the Ripper terrified an entire city.
So Sam's looking for more creativity.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's the great line from 30 Rock when Alec Baldwin's wife finds they're stuck in Canada. She's giving birth, and that they're bringing meth to the U.S. She goes, we can't even produce our own meth anymore. What's happened to our manufacturing base?
Okay, that's sort of true, though.
Well, thank you, Bede. This is Breaking Battlegrounds. We'll be right back with Gary Gigi and some financial advice to wrap up the show.
All right, our final guest of the program, a regular guest, Gary Gigi. He is the president and CEO of Gigi Capital. Follow him on X at Gary Gigi or go to gigicapital.com. Gary, Democrats are trying to revive a Jimmy Carter tax on windfall profits. Tell us what's going on there.
This is a really bad idea, you guys. And so the whole concept,
You sound totally depressed talking about it. I can just tell by your voice it's a bad idea.
it really is. And so it is all about the Democrats' desire to reduce the incentive for oil and gas. So when the price of oil and gas has moved up, they feel like if they tax that, that's going to be more difficult for oil and gas companies to make a profit. Therefore, they will be less incentivized in order to try and make a profit on oil and gas. So let me tell you why this is a really bad idea. It's self-evident. However, I don't believe that there's such a thing as a windfall profit. There are only profits. I think it is ridiculous for the government or elements of the government to say, okay, you had a really good year, therefore we're going to tax you higher. We should be celebrating when companies do really well. So it's not the oil companies' fault that the price of oil has gone up, and so they shouldn't be penalized for that either. So, and typically what happens is when you tax something more, you're going to get less of it. So really, really bad idea from the get-go.
Gary, I don't. This isn't exactly economics. It's more politics. But I'll throw this out there. Do you think the oil companies are making a little bit of a mistake, like for right now with this Iran war thing? The minute it kicked off, gas prices at the pump shot up $1.50, $2 all across the country. The cost of the gas being sold didn't do that because it takes time for that supply to go through from crude oil to be refined to get to the stations. And to be sold as fuel. Do they need to be a little bit careful when there are instances like this not to appear to be gouging?
Yeah, I think that the appearance is maybe greater than the reality, in that oil, therefore gasoline, those are global commodities. So the moment that the price of oil goes up, then the price of gas by extension is going to go up.
Yes.
And it is a competition between the local gas stations to try and be slightly less than whoever their competitor happens to be. So I know this happens. I'm not sure. I know it makes great political theater. I think that these oil companies are really trying to guess what the risk is. And when you have fighting that breaks out in the Middle East or anywhere that oil comes from, the threat that they may no longer be able to get that oil, therefore produce gasoline, goes up. So I'm not saying that the oil and gas companies have some nefarious reason for doing this, but you're right, it looks bad.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's a nefarious reason. I just think you'd be better off being like, okay, we have a month before this price increase actually gets to the pumps. So let's hold off a couple of weeks and maybe raise it more gradually during that time period. I just come away, Chuck, I come away from this thinking they're not thinking politically when they do these things. And
you're right about that, Sam.
And I think they have to. I know they don't want to.
Yeah. Is that I don't believe they are thinking politically about this. I think they're thinking about, the risks involved with getting oil out of the ground, turning it into gasoline, jet fuel, stuff like that. And so they're trying to gauge their risk. And so I don't think that they're thinking politically at all whatsoever.
No. Let's talk about a Wall Street Journal article. It's talking about the economy is on the edge. What could tip it over? What could help pull it through? What do you think can tip the economy over, and what can pull it through? Because Republicans, not that you're a political analyst, but Republicans...
But we're dragging him into that area today.
I mean, the economy has to be seen as improving by the summer, right? Gas prices have to be lower. You got to see things if Republicans have any chance of retaining Congress. What do you think could tip this over? I mean, how much longer do you think we could keep doing this war till we're just out of luck on it?
So for me, it is all about oil. And so what has caused a recession more times than not is the doubling in the price of oil. So before the broke out, oil was around $70 a barrel. So that tells me 140, 145, maybe 150 at the highest. That's where you're tipped into a recession easily. Price of oil has started to come down. That is great, headed in the right direction. Fighting is not over, so it could just as easily go back up there. But I think that's the greatest risk is going from oil at 70, 75-ish to 140 to 150. That could cause a recession probably greater than anything. But the second greatest thing would be, and I'm surprisingly hearing this more often right now, which is the Fed raising interest rates, which no one was thinking about at the beginning of this year. They were thinking that the Fed was going to lower interest rates. And now that the price of oil has gone up, which again is inflationary. And so I don't think it's permanent. I think it's a temporary thing.
Correct.
So, but the Fed raising interest rates, and I don't think that they're going to do it. I'm just hearing a lot of chatter about that. That is another thing that could cause a recession. So oil, Fed raising interest rates, those are your two greatest risks.
We all think we've seen Donald Trump have a meltdown. Them raising interest rates would be the ultimate Donald Trump meltdown.
So
absolutely.
Before we let you go, though, Gary, I want to get this back to the personal finance side of things for folks out there. The market's been through one of those periods of dropping prices, dropping values across the board. Is this a good time if someone has some money sitting on the sideline to call you or someone like you and get that money into the game?
So let me give you the short answer, the long answer. The long answer, absolutely. But you don't put it all to work at once. That is the short answer, is that if you have money, discretionary money, that's sitting in the bank doing nothing, absolutely, I think it is a great time to be putting money to work. And every drop in the market ever has fully recovered and more. I see no reason to think that this is going to be any different than that. So, but again, you don't put it all to work at once. Let's say you've got $10,000 that you're wanting to put into the market. Start off putting $2,000 in. If the market drops down, put another $2,000 in. And so just judiciously try and find opportunities to put the money to work. But yes, I do think it is a good opportunity to put money to work, as long as you're thinking, I don't need to touch this money for 2 years or longer. If you can say that, then yes, it is. If you cannot say that, you're saying, okay, I need to put a new roof on the house in 6 months. Absolutely do not put it in the market.
That's great. Gary Gigi, as always, thank you, my friend, for coming on. Folks, Gary, how do people find you? How do people find you?
Yeah, a couple of ways of doing that. They can go to the website, which is gigicapital.com, GYGI capital.com, or you can call us on the phone, which is 801-787-0342, 801-787-0342.
Thank you, Gary Gigi. Have a great weekend, my friend.
Have a good weekend, guys. Thanks very much.
Folks, we want to thank you for joining us today. Of course, you can always find us wherever you get your social media. You can find us on Substack. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find our clips on YouTube, which we're getting quite an audience on there, surprisingly so. But we wanted to leave you with something here. A British news anchor just explained Trump's strategy in Iran better than anyone else in the American media, because everybody in American media seems to be
quite frankly, Trump's philosophy. He
understands. And the philosophy behind it.
Yeah.
This is from GB News, and Alex Armstrong's the anchor, and I'm highly encouraging you to listen to this 5 minutes and 50 seconds. Share it with your family and friends. Not saying you have to agree with the strategy, but this is the strategy. And for Sam and I, it makes perfect sense if you're thinking long-term. And unfortunately, as we talked about the Washington politicians and the fraudsters, this is a long-term approach to make sure your children and grandchildren are safe. You know, as there's a great line in Lioness, I remember the following. Her daughter asked why she's in CIA. She explained her dad, or grandfather, when he fought in World War II, he goes, so you don't have to speak German. And she goes, I do this so you don't have to speak Chinese.
The Trump geopolitical bent in this administration this term is the most important thing that's happened in terms of
decades.
U.S. geopolitics in decades. ignored the rise of a geopolitical rival with the ability to change the world order in ways that would be devastating.
And I'm part of it because I just thought, you give people free trade, economics, people do it. That's not true.
It didn't work.
I was wrong. We all tried it.
It was a great. The thought was correct. The outcome didn't pan out.
So, folks, take time, listen to 5 minutes, 50 seconds, and of course, share the whole show because it's brilliant. Have a great weekend.
Here's the truth about this war that nobody wants to tell you. It isn't about toppling Iran's regime before you ask. It's about reshaping the global world order. And I think that's happening right now. And I want to tell you how Britain is staring down the barrel of a dark age we haven't seen for over 1,000 years. This all comes, of course, as President Trump says Tuesday will be Power Plant Day and Bridge Day, all wrapped up in one in Iran if the key shipping lane in the Strait of Hormuz is not reopened. And of course, lots of expletives there we have blurred out for you. But this is bigger than a headline or a Truth Social post in this war. And the evidence is not actually being kept from us. We're just blind to seeing it because nobody's talking about it. America has made no secret of its new doctrine. It is stepping back from being the world's police and repositioning itself as a powerful, self-reliant fortress.
That is why President Trump has drawn a new strategic map from Greenland to the Gulf of America to the Panama Canal and its surrounding countries. At the Department of War, we call this strategic map the Greater North America.
Interesting stuff, isn't it? So what does America actually gain from this war before we get on to the Greater North America? Well, let's look at a map here, shall we? I'll bring this up for you. The Strait of Hormuz, you can see there, is one of the most critical energy choke points on this planet. It is also a whopping 45% of China's oil flowing through it. That is a lot of oil that China needs. But it isn't just Iran. Cast your minds back to January this year, where Trump effectively has now captured Venezuela and declared its oil is under their control. And if you have a look at this graph, who there in the red relies heavily on that oil? Well, it looks like China to me. Now consider the impeccable timing of all of this since January. America is right in the middle of a tariff and trade negotiation with the very stubborn and very powerful, might I add, Chinese government, who are not budging on Donald Trump's arrangements here. Well, look who's got the upper hand all of a sudden. It's America. They are now controlling the vast swathes of oil that China needs. That puts them in a very strong position going forward on these tariff agreements. And Europe is also getting hit hard a lot with this. With Russian energy totally off the table and domestic energy security weakened by this leftist obsession with net zero, Europe is becoming increasingly dependent on external oil supply and energy supply. And that puts America, again, in a very strong position because we will soon be wholly dependent on American supplies of oil and gas. They will dictate terms and use energy as leverage, not just economically, but geopolitically too. And what do we know that they really want? Greenland. They want Greenland. They've made that very clear and they didn't get it yet. So the longer this war drags on, the more dependent the world is becoming on the USA. And it's not accidental. What we're seeing is the emergence of what you heard from Pete Hegseth there, the Secretary of State for War, and described by Donald Trump as the Greater North America. It is stretching from Greenland down through the Panama Canal, securing the entire hemisphere as a self-sufficient economic and security zone for the United States of America. But guess who's not on there? Europe. We are not part of America's future plans as it withdraws from the world. And it isn't just a coincidence that the United Kingdom has been targeted the most by Trump and America of late. The UK is internationally renowned for its special relationship with America. Trump is signalling that that relationship is over, not just to us, but to everyone else around us. And frankly, Keir Starmer gave him ample reason to do so, of course. but also because Trump can now point to our allies and say, you all let us down. And in his own words, as he said, we won't forget it. It is the perfect reason for America to withdraw from the global stage. So no more global policing, no more endless foreign commitments, just a fortified, resource-rich power base that others have no choice but to rely on. That is the new America. And that brings us to Britain, because the consequences for us will be catastrophic. Right now, we are dangerously exposed. We have no energy security. We import around 60% of our food. We have no major industry. Our military is decimated, as we're hearing time and time again. And politically, we are deeply fractured now. Even culturally, we are crumbling at the seams, dominated by global political issues like Gaza, climate fanaticism, and movements like BLM that frankly have nothing to do with the state of play in Britain. The things that once united us, our faith and our national identity, are now pulling us apart due to years of left-wing globalism. Unless we act quickly and decisively, Britain risks entering a dark age as America retreats, one that we haven't seen for over 1,000 years.